The snow fell that morning as though the sky itself were exhaling sorrow, slow and unrelenting, softening the edges of every roof and fence in the town of Ash Hollow. The main street was narrow, little more than frozen earth pressed smooth by the wheels of wagons and the boots of men, yet to Alara Greyfeather it seemed vast and cruelly exposed. Each step she took in her thin leather shoes announced her presence like a trespass. The weight of eyes pressed against her, eyes that measured, that judged, that wondered what place a girl like her thought she might claim here. She kept her chin lowered, though her gaze flickered upward once, catching the smoke rising from chimneys and the way it tangled with the snow, as though the town itself tried to hide behind its own breath. She had come for work, or so she told herself when courage wavered. Work meant coin and coin meant survival through winter. Yet even before she reached the saloon where jobs were sometimes posted, she sensed the truth. This place had not been waiting for her. It had its cooks, its laundresses, its quiet women who knew how to vanish into the edges of the room. She was not invisible enough, and every man leaning against a post or sipping whiskey at noon seemed to notice her difference. The air tightened in her chest as she pushed open the swinging doors, the smell of tobacco and damp wool rushing around her like a wave that sought to drown. The room went quiet, the way rooms sometimes do when a single presence unsettles all. She paused, felt her hands tremble against her shawl and steadied them. Behind the bar, a foreman with a thinning mustache and a tired apron raised his brow. "You looking for someone?" His voice carried no warmth, though not cruelty either, merely that flatness of men accustomed to saying no. "For work," she answered. Her voice was softer than she meant it to be. "Kitchen, laundry, whatever is needed." The foreman wiped the counter with a rag, studying her the way one studies a horse not yet broken. "We've got more hands than mouths to feed already. Best try the boarding house." The refusal came quickly, but his eyes lingered too long, and she felt herself shrinking under their weight. The men nearby muttered low comments she could not fully hear, though the laughter that followed needed no translation. She lowered her gaze to the scuffed floorboards, the shame spreading hot beneath her skin. In that moment she wished she had turned back before ever stepping inside. But then the saloon doors pushed open once more, carrying with them a gust of snow and the scrape of boots too polished for this town. A tall figure stepped in, brushing white flakes from a dark wool coat. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who did not need to prove his place among others. The room shifted around him the way wheat bends around the path of the wind. Silas McGraw was known in Ash Hollow, though Alara had never laid eyes on him before. His family's ranch sprawled beyond the hills, rich in cattle and horses, his wealth and inheritance and his reputation burnished by whispered tales of card games and duels survived. He was not a man people interrupted, yet when his eyes landed on Alara, something in the air seemed to falter. She looked away too quickly, her cheeks warming though the room was cold. Men like him did not look at women like her except with mockery or worse. She tightened her shawl, preparing to slip past him, but his steps carried him closer. His voice was low, steady, not meant for the whole room, though somehow it silenced the laughter lingering in corners. "There is no work for you here," he said first as if echoing the foreman, but then his tone shifted, quiet and startling. "Not work. Something else." Her breath caught, confusion rippling through her like a sudden wind. She searched his face for cruelty, expecting a smirk, a challenge, but found only an unreadable steadiness. "I don't understand," she whispered. Silas leaned slightly closer, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "I chose you," he said, words meant for her alone though she felt the whole room listening. "Not for labor. For life beside me." The sentence struck her like a stone dropped into still water, sending shock outward in every direction. She stared at him, uncomprehending, her mouth parting though no sound emerged. A laugh broke somewhere behind them, sharp and disbelieving. The foreman raised a brow but said nothing. Alara's cheeks burned, shame mingled with something stranger, fear laced with a fragile, aching spark of possibility. "I don't know you," she managed, her voice brittle. "No," he said simply, and yet his gaze did not waver. "But I know what I see." The silence stretched until she felt it would suffocate her. She turned, intending to leave, to flee the humiliation, yet her feet betrayed her with their slowness. His words lingered like smoke, impossible to brush away. The snow outside met her face with sharp cold, reminding her that survival cared little for pride. Still, she walked, each step heavy, the question trailing her. What kind of man speaks such words in a saloon, and what kind of woman does he imagine she is? The days that followed were a blur of waiting. The boarding house offered her a corner bed in exchange for chores, and she worked with quiet determination, though the whispers never ceased. Some said Silas McGraw had lost a wager and sought to pay it with her hand. Others muttered she must have bewitched him, that no other reason could explain his strange offer. Ilara kept her head low, but at night she pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the rapid beat that would not slow. Silas did not come immediately. When he did, it was not with grand gestures but with small, startling acts. A pair of gloves left at the door, stitched from leather warm enough to keep frostbite at bay. Firewood stacked neatly outside the boarding house though no one saw him carry it. He did not demand her attention. He lingered at the edges, a presence both unsettling and strangely protective. She wondered why he waited. Men of wealth did not ask, they took. Yet each time their paths crossed, at the well, on the street, his eyes held patience rather than pressure. She told herself it was a game though she could not decipher its rules. The snow deepened, storms rolling across the plains with a ferocity that forced even the bold indoors. One night, the wind screamed so fiercely that shutters rattled loose and the boarding house fire dwindled low. She was sent to the nearby cabin where Silas often stayed, carrying a kettle of stew to keep the hearth warm. When she entered, he was there, brushing snow from his shoulders, his coat heavy with frost. Neither spoke at first. The fire popped in the silence as she set the kettle down. He removed his gloves, his hands raw from the cold, and slid the bowl toward her before taking his own. The gesture was small, yet it startled her more than any declaration. To be served before him, she could not recall a man who had offered such regard. They ate without many words, yet the silence between them was not empty. It filled with the sound of their breaths, the scrape of spoons, the crackle of firewood. She found herself wondering about the man beyond the legend, beyond the wealth. His face bore lines of solitude more than indulgence, his eyes carrying storms of their own. Still, whispers grew louder in town. "He's gone mad," they said. "That girl's a burden, a shame." Ilara felt the words pierce deeper than frost, and one evening she resolved to leave, to spare herself and him the ridicule. She gathered her shawl, but when she stepped outside she found him waiting by the post, hat tipped low. He did not stop her with force, only by standing there in the open beside her, where all could see. Men muttered from porches, women stared from windows, yet Silas remained unbent, silent, dignified. That quiet defiance did something words could not. For the first time she felt the weight of judgment shift, perhaps not vanish but loosen its grip. She walked beside him then, not as a possession, not as a claim, but as if choosing, step by step, to test what belonging might feel like. The blizzard worsened in the days that followed, locking them together in that cabin where time slowed and each hour stretched long. They mended torn fabric, stirred soup, tended fire. In those simple acts, conversation grew, not rushed but unfolding like snowflakes landing one by one. He spoke of the ranch, of his father's harsh lessons, of nights gambling when he should have been sleeping. She told him of rivers from her childhood, of songs her mother hummed when the world seemed unbearable. Each word was a thread, and though fragile, they began to weave something neither named. One night, when the wind howled so fiercely the walls trembled, he spoke again, his voice hushed yet firm. "I chose you because I saw my own loneliness mirrored in your eyes. Not pity. Recognition." Her hands trembled where they rested in her lap. To be seen so clearly was both terrifying and tender. She did not answer, not then, but in the silence her heart shifted, as though a locked door had cracked open. Morning came at last with the rare brilliance of sunlight on snow, the world glistening gold and white. The town had not softened, nor had whispers ceased, but within her something had steadied. She turned to Silas as he stepped outside, his breath clouding in the air. Slowly, deliberately she placed her hand in his. Not as surrender, not as debt, but as choice. They stood there without words, the snow dazzling around them, their silence speaking louder than any vow. The world might doubt, but she no longer did. She was not unseen, not unwanted. She was chosen, and in choosing him in return, she claimed her own worth. And if you lean close, you can almost hear what she felt in that moment. That love sometimes comes not with thunder, but with the hush of falling snow, asking only the courage to reach out and answer.